Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Some y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So this is your pilot, Black Mind, speaking. And I'm going to ask you to go ahead and remain seated for the duration of this announcement. I expect that the turbulence will probably be a lot. And I appreciate you all waiting while I gave time for others to come in. Shouts out to to my most consistent donor, MLR, and I want to give a shout out as well to another donor, FO, who donated via crypto, and to the base Pluto. If you ever hear this, base Pluto, go ahead and put your crypto information in the description because he wants to donate to you as well through Coinbase. So you all have seen the title, Western Women, Traditional Women, and Adulthood. And I'm sorry for being late, but every time I make a plan, my plan is fine, but I can't predict and I can't plan for other people to be late with things that they're supposed to be on time for. And I've gone ahead and taken the first step when it comes to the business that I'm going to launch in a third country. After having done research, I found that I don't have to actually be in the country to own a company there. So I went ahead and got that started, and I've reserved the location for it. This business that for which I have an idea, will allow me to, even though that's not going to be the main focus of the business officially, it will allow me to combat misandry in this nation and preferably even in that region. There are ingredients in the soil that can be utilized to further rabid feminism and militant feminism, and then the misandry that's going to sprout therefrom. But by the same token, oh, by the way, guys, I apologize for the echo. There's not much I can do about that, though. I'm doing this in another room now, so there is going to be an echo from this room. But also there are elements in the soil in this location I've selected that would allow, with the right information and the right exposure, it would allow me to combat that. Now, if you look at Andrew Tate, who recently became Muslim, shout outs to him and Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Tate, if you ever hear this. He's now living in Dubai, and Tate is in a position to combat the misandry and the rabid feminism that's popping up in that area, not just in Dubai, but in the entire Emirates. Now, the Emirates are not just one culture, to be honest with you. I want people to keep this in mind. What's going on, Simeon? Shout outs to Simeon Anderson, another donor who's helped out. And by the way, most of the donors that anyone that's donated to crypto also get a shout out, but most have just simply, at this point, most have donated through CashApp. And I appreciate you all doing that because it shows up right off the bat. Now, after there was one donor, autodidact, and he sent in a donation that was pretty generous. And when he sent that in, that was the last time that I got an audio notification. So if anybody sent anything in the last few minutes and I didn't say anything, it's only because I didn't hear the notification. But give me a moment. Another shout out to MLR coming through with the 15 from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. I thank you. It doesn't show me exactly when, but apparently it was within the last few minutes. I wanted to say this though, you gentlemen, and especially MLR and Autodidact, have really helped me to be able to pay the fee to reserve the location for the business I plan to start in a third nation. It's not in the US and it's not in Saudi. It is adjacent to one area that a lot of passport bros and SYSBM brethren love to travel. So this can spread outwardly. What I plan to do. There are ingredients in the soil that can be utilized to foster this nasty misandry. But by the same token, there are elements in the soil that can be utilized to combat it. And that's what I plan to do. I plan to combat that. And by putting myself, by reserving this location, that has allowed me a central focal point from which to do this, while also doing something else. So looking at this title, Western Women, Traditional Women, and Adulthood. You can even ask Mr. Tate about this. Many of you know who Andrew Tate is. Most everyone knows who he is at this point. And Andrew Tate has tipped off a lot of people, and he's actually made even just in the Muslim community itself, by itself. Andrew Tate has made quite the controversy and quite the waves, because a lot of young Muslim guys were already looking up to him. And that is because a lot of young Muslim guys in the UK and the US got sick of this idea of being emasculated in the name of religion. A lot of us said, wait a minute, we don't accept being emasculated in the name of Allah just because some church people talked about turning the other cheek. We have actually a guideline. And shout out to KT coming through. I greatly appreciate that, again, from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. That sound actually came through. That notification made a noise on this end. So that's a good sign. That means that the notifications are back on. So Tate then became Muslim. And what I want to point out is that we are not allowed, peace, Red Lion, we are not allowed in our faith to believe that they don't have the capacity to be adults. We're not allowed to think this way. We have to understand that they have the moral and the intellectual capacity for adulthood like men do. They have logic, they have emotions. We have logic, we have emotions. And there are times for each one. We do have to prioritize logic over emotions. Emotions do have their validity. Peace, Blugatti. Yes. All praises due to Allah. King of Kings, the compeller, the giver of life and death, the resurrector, and the provider. We have to believe that he provided them with the capacity to be adults. We have seen that when they have jobs, they do fairly well. We have seen that they can make very good pediatricians, nephrologists, physicists, astrophysicists, astrobiologists, geologists. We've seen that they can go into these fields that typically they did not work in for generations. And within 2 or 3 generations of some of these fields becoming as advanced as they did, they went in and they have done as well as men have done, when they do put their logic first and then their emotions second. We've seen that they're able to do that. It's hard. It's hard even for men at times. But we've seen that they can. And so we have to keep in mind that some folks come along and say, well, they're not able to do that. In Arabic, the word for humanity is nas, N-A-S. And that actually comes from the root nasa, just N-S. Nasa means he forgot. That's the root of the verb forget, or the command form is insa, forget. If I tell you, forget about her, insa anha, or forget about him, insa anhu. That's the command form for forget. Nisyan means forgetfulness. That word is actually considered to be older than the word for human beings. So as a species, not as a gender, but as a species, we were named after forgetfulness because people forget stuff. Now this is, people with good intentions forget. That's where we got our name from. But when you categorize gender, regardless of the species, just gender, the word for the male gender, not specifically men of the human species, but just for the male gender, is dhikr. And that has to do with remembering, because dhikr means, or dhakira means memory. Idhkur is the command form for remember. So we're named after, as a species, as a gender, we're named after remembering, just as a gender. Now that applies to a male tiger or a man. a male gorilla or a male chimp, doesn't matter. So we are required to remember more. We're required to be more responsible because we're in charge. I accept that. But see, God was never unfair. And some people may not even believe in him as they're listening to this. But if they don't believe in him, then at least they also believe that he is not unfair. If you believe in him, you don't believe he's unfair. And if you don't believe in him, you don't believe that he's unfair. That's an unthinkable concept to most people. If we have authority, we have responsibility. If we have responsibility, we have authority. That's the gist of it. But because they have the capacity for adult thinking, moral judgment, they also have the responsibility that comes with it. And what's happening right now is that there's really one debate going on in between misandrist women and rabid feminists, which are one and the same. Some of them want to say, well, you know what? Some of the ones that want to be traditional in the West, the ones in the West that want to be traditional will still try at times to throw off the responsibility and say, well, I can't be as responsible. I can't be as logical and as cold. And they may be right that they cannot be as logical and as cold. They may be right about that. That's true. They will still try their best. They'll do all they can to use that to get you to think that therefore they don't even have to be adults. What happens if you pass away? Now they've got to start. If they were not before, then they have to be afterwards. And this is what I wanted to tell the men in here. Don't choose traditional women that act like children. They may not demand the authority, which is good, but they will still try to get out of even the fair share of responsibility that applies to them. And that is not okay, even when they're traditional. Don't let the Western traditional one try to psych you out into shunning all or into taking all responsibility off of their shoulders, even for moral decisions. Now, does this mean financially? No. Financially, the responsibility is on us. I mean, Islamically speaking, what women earn is up to them to store, save, or spend as they choose, within limits, of course. That's true. What's his is the family's, but what's hers is hers. Financially speaking, that does ring true in our faith. However, she has to live within his means. She must do so. Whatever she spends towards the upkeep of the family or towards him is her choice. She's allowed to do it. She gets extra credit if she does. It's not something she has to do. But she is not entitled to a particular lifestyle, let alone the lifestyle that everyone sees on TV and would love to live if they can, men and women alike, if we could. They're not entitled to the lifestyle that many of them are demanding nowadays. But what we got to do is we gentlemen, we've been tricked. Now I'm going to ask you guys to put your ages in the chat. Just type your ages in the chat. I want to see something. Go ahead, gentlemen, put your ages in the chat. You can give me, if you want for privacy reasons to not do it, you can round up or round down. I don't mind. I put mine in first, all right? Got 26, 37, I'm in my late 40s. You gentlemen are young. Okay, now there are 8 people that are tuned in right now. And we're talking typing 2 digits. I know there's nobody in here listening right now that's 9 or younger, and there's nobody that's 100 or older. So it's 2 digits. Come on, gentlemen. I only got 2 answers. Blue Gotti and Red Lion are with me. All right. We got somebody in his early 40s, T3. Excellent. I'm writing this for a reason. There's a reason I'm putting this in here. Red line said, hustle up. Come on, gentlemen, type these 2 digits in. I got 3 answers, 4 if you include mine. So that means that there are 3, and 1 person dropped off because I asked people to put their age, and I did it for a reason. I'm not doing this to get in your business. I don't have your social security numbers. Don't want those. Okay, 8. So somebody else came back in just now. Oh, and by the way, gentlemen, if you can, go ahead and hit the share button. I will ask that. I will ask folks to hit the share button. All right, Ayla Rue said leave the West, and I agree. Now, Ayla Rue, for some reason, I want to say that you said you're in your 20s now. I'm asking everyone to put their age in the chat, even if they round up or down for privacy reasons, because of what I'm going to tell them next regarding this title, regarding this topic. I see that y'all have hit 10 likes, and I appreciate that. I'll also ask, all right, 27. Okay, cool. Thank you, sir. And I'll also ask you guys to hit the share button. For those tuning in just now, again, my thanks to the donors who have sent, especially through CashApp, because that's where most of it has come through. Only 3 have come through crypto, and one was the day before yesterday, and the others were months before that, like last spring and early summer. So since then, it's been CashApp. I want to thank you, gentlemen, because you have helped for me to at least be able to pay a booking fee to get a location, to get a district of the city blocked off for business. What this means is that nobody else can, within a 5-kilometer radius, no one else can open up another of the same franchise. So I want to thank you, gentlemen. What that has done is that has allowed me, that has actually allowed an opportunity for me, as long as everything can proceeds forward as planned. It allows me to combat the misandry and the rapid feminism where I'm going to be going, while still doing my job and being responsible. Now, okay, so I'm only going to get about, so this is it. I'm going to get 4 answers. That's it? Okay, all right. So, gentlemen, and I'm going to address this first to T3, because T3 is the closest to my age. When we were coming up, were we ever encouraged to not, and I'm talking when we were young, growing up, were we ever encouraged to not pursue or not date a woman because she acted younger than her age? Were we ever allowed to say, you know what, I'm not going to be with her because she talks in a baby voice when she doesn't get what she wants. She pouts to try to get her way. She doesn't act like an adult. Were we ever taught to say this? Were we ever taught to assess maturity when we were young in women? Peace, VC Rome. What's going on? What's good with you? Go ahead and put it in the chat, gentlemen. Were we ever encouraged to do that? T3 says he doesn't remember it. He does not remember it. Now, I don't know. And the thing is that for T3, I know because of the similarities in our age range, that's not something that he would have heard. Now, the rest of y'all are younger than me by a wider margin. So I'm going to ask you guys that are younger. I know his answer. I'm going to ask you guys that are young, and I really don't know to what extent that this answer is true or not. You have to tell me. This is not a rhetorical question. I'm going to ask Blue Guardian and Red Lion and A. LaRue. I'm going to ask you, gentlemen, would you ever encourage by any peers or through media to assess her maturity as a reason to pursue or not pursue? And granted, now, I mean, I've stated before that I've stated what my rules of chastity are with regard to my faith. I have to go by them. It's nothing personal. It's just the rules that apply to everybody. But based on the rules with which many of you grew up, I already know marital status was not a reason to say, no, don't try to get them drawers. That's not the way we were taught. Even I didn't grow up taught that. I just heard some people saying it from time to time. But I'm asking you were you ever told, okay, the younger guys have said never at any point. Nobody ever told them this. Hey, LaRue, anybody ever said this? Now, have you ever heard of a guy confiding in his friends, or a friend of yours confiding to you that they suffer or they struggled in a relationship because of her immaturity? Man, she be acting childish, bro. Anybody? Okay. Do you see what's going on here? You see what's happening now? Blue Gotti said yes. A. LaRue's been discouraged from dating younger, but not because of maturity. So I guess that might have been because of finances. So we've been encouraged with a sort of pimp mentality, yeah, date her because she got that money. But, okay, T3 has said he hears that. He hears the guys confiding. Blue Gotti says he hears the guys confiding. VC Realm has heard it put in a different way. So again, what's going on is that we're not taught to think preemptively and utilize the same reasons that they utilize to eliminate us from the runnings. We are not trained to do that. We have been trained to accept immaturity. There it is right there. No rules or set standards. And that includes maturity, just acting your age. Gentlemen, you have now, many of you have some work experience at this point. I mean, I don't think you're sitting up here on the phone with me, or let alone on a laptop listening, and you've never had a job before. I doubt that's the case. You have worked and you have seen how they can come to work on time and do their jobs responsibly and do them well. You've seen them be irresponsible and responsible. You've seen them be incompetent and highly competent at their jobs that they work with you. You've seen them be all over the spectrum, just like guys have. They are capable of utilizing their logic and their brains. They're capable of responsibility. It is when they come to us, they turn all of that off. They turn off the maturity. They turn off the logic. They turn off the adulthood. Who taught them to do this? Because I'm going to tell you now, when you leave the West and you go into traditional areas, even though the cultures are not all the same as each other, they are different. That is one thing that they're not particularly taught to do. It's cool for them to look young. It's cool for them to be young. But the immature ones will get passed up for the mature ones time and time again. You understand, gentlemen? And I know because I live abroad. Been married twice abroad. And one thing I can honestly say that I have not had to tolerate has been immaturity and childishness. I've dealt with forgetfulness, sometimes prioritizing an emotion over logic. These are normal things, and I say sometimes because this has not been all the time. Red Lion, exactly. That was mine too. Coldly logical as long as it was convenient, and then emotional whenever it was convenient, and usually completely emotional at home while logical at work. I remember being married stateside, and you guys know how hard it is to get a job, especially a good job, when you are a heterosexual black male in the US, probably Canada too. Some of you may be listening from the UK because now there are 14 pairs of eyes and ears on here. Y'all may have dealt with this as well. Now it's 15. You all know how that can be. And when I began to explain that I was facing this, that, yeah, of course I could get get jobs, but none of them were going to pay the bills that we had. And it didn't matter that I had a degree. When I was married in the States, she looked at me and she said, but your name is so under the radar here. I mean, you've got an English language first and last name. Here I am with an African first name and a Muslim, not specifically African last name. And I wear hijab and I get jobs when I go for them. And you can only get these dead end minimum wage jobs. And I was told this. And I said, well, you have to use logic. You have to understand someone else's emotions, but still use logic to understand how that happens, how that works. Obviously, I'm not going to intentionally sabotage myself in the job market. If I were going to sabotage myself, I would try to seem unfit for minimum wage jobs. But if I did that, then I'd get no jobs, because once the job is good, I don't get it. Now, what does that tell you? Got a degree. And she even said, you're light-skinned with straight hair, so you even have those advantages. I remember her saying this. And I told her, yeah, but when I go in, I don't change my voice. Besides, it wouldn't work. Doesn't mean that I pass as one of them. So when it came to that, she thought that she could cover up her emotions in the form of logic to make and bend reality such that I was going to get around people's biases and fly under their radar. And that's not how it worked. We've all had to deal with this, gentlemen. What they've done is they have come along and functioned, as I stated before, they have functioned as a romantic and marital and sexual labor union to lower the maximum output for all of them via agreement. And they enforce this through the sisterhood, through the hyenocracy. Good point. Absolutely. You know that undercover officers, VC realm, also are supposed to get counseling for this? The FBI sent people in to spy on the Muslim community specifically. When the FBI did this, a lot of them they needed counseling afterwards. So I had to move the chair around. A lot of them needed counseling afterwards. And they didn't get it. And they started to suffer. And some of them needed drugs to cope. There was one guy in Canada that did that. He sold out some Muslims, lied on them. I'm pretty sure it was a lie, because who'd be that stupid to just openly discuss something like what he said? He said he did it in exchange for $2 million. Later on, he admitted that he had tried cocaine before. No joke. They needed counseling for these things just to do undercover work, because it's similar to going in and becoming or depicting a really toxic character on screen. And the thing is, some of that undercover work lasts for longer than it takes to film a movie. You might be able to finish the filming of a movie. The editing, I don't know how long that could take, but you may be able to finish the filming of a movie in a few weeks, depending on what the movie is. So what's going on, back to what I was saying about this union, is that they have functioned as a union so as to make you gentlemen understand that you are going to only get so much out of them. They've gotten together, and that's one of the things I've come to understand, is that social media is where they rat each other out. That's where we find this stuff. But I've also come to understand that apparently for a long time now, the hair salons have been where these things are discussed. When they have these phone conversations with each other, that's one. And these hair salons are where they have these discussions. And of course, we're not supposed to be in there. And I agree. And that's where they can discuss these things there and on the phone. That's where they can pass these things on and apply the social pressure. This is where it happens. And of course, I'm sure that at the job, if they have a space where there are no men at the job, they'll do the same thing there too. Absolutely, they will. But what they've done is they have functioned as a union. They don't like each other, but the one thing that most of them are going to agree to do is to lower the maximum output for your benefit. But the same token, on the flip side of the same coin, they raise the minimum that you must produce and put out and show and be and have. So what they're pretty much doing as a union is they're using one thing for leverage. They don't have much else. They're using one thing, well, let's say two things, looks and them drawers. They're using this for leverage so that you are living in exactly what you must live in the West, because most of you tuning in are still living in the West. Most of you are in the United States tuning in from there. Some of you are tuning in from Anglophone islands in the Americas, maybe Belize and Guyana. Maybe one of you is tuning in from Canada. About one or two may tune in from the UK. Now, pay attention to this. Yes, by 2030, I've heard that too, that about 53% of them will be by themselves within 8 years. And I hope that that is the case. From the bottom of my black heart and the depths of my black mind, I hope so, because that's what they have decided this for men. They sat back and made this decision. And then they sat up and acted like it wasn't them or they couldn't help it. Now, granted, they're allowed to. They're allowed to pick what they want, not pick what they don't. I generally stand for that, but they have to accept that this is one of the consequences if they cannot assess men individually. And what they're doing is they're saying that in order to function as a sexual labor union and to try to get more out of us in exchange for a lot less. Why did I say very less? In exchange for so much less, this is the consequence. Because what they're thinking is that whatever is valuable in life that they want, they can just force us to make more of it. That's what's going through their minds. A lot of us don't realize this. They don't have a concept of inflation. That is a logical concept that they don't want to accept. If something is valuable, its quantity is generally limited. Even if it is abundant, it can be exhausted. Even if it can be replenished and renewable, it can still be exhausted before it replenishes again, even down to oxygen, or what's abundant enough in the atmosphere for us. But it can go up and down. And that's one of the cheapest and most basics of the blessings that's valuable to us. After that, water. What's going on, Roger Report? So what's happening is that they have made these decisions. They think that what they want in life, the lifestyle that they want, everyone can live, as long as they just demand more out of us. Meanwhile, what we're demanding from them is not something that is limited. They're artificially limiting these things, starting with maturity and basic logic and common sense. I'm not joking, gentlemen. When they start acting like they can't deliver on these things past the point they're delivering on them, they're lying. They are not telling the truth. They cannot always prioritize logic over emotions. Even men can't do that all the time. But they are capable of doing this. They are capable of functioning like adults. As much as the two genders do need each other, they are very capable of functioning as adults with logic first, emotions second. They're capable of that. They simply just decide, I'm not going to do it. And they're not even necessarily refusing to do this because it makes it easier for them all the time. They will turn around and make that decision just to make things difficult for you. Because a lot of times, especially in the West, they're trained to prioritize your suffering even over their own relief. Crimson Cure has talked about this. So what you were seeing, and by the way, Roger Report, this was inspired by your live stream a few days ago. This is important here. Take a look at this. Blue Gotti, you got an idea. Now, I was not in the salons that much. When I was a little boy, I mean, pretty small, there were times I went to the salons. But I didn't understand a lot of what they were talking about. I was reading, getting into coloring books, things like that, to be entertained while they fixed each other's hair. And that was only a few times. But what happened is, and I've stated this before, is that 1999 and 2000, my mother began to tell my brother and me what she was hearing because she noticed the shift and the change. She picked up on it. She saw that it was just getting nasty and more toxic. And by 99 and 2000, at that point, especially 2001, the beginning of 2001, at that point, she felt a sense of alarm and was telling my brother and me how bad it was. So what was funny about it was that what I was talking about being a real serious problem, what I was talking about being really bad, when I was in high school and in college, she thought I was exaggerating. Then later on, she began to realize, no, this is serious. It's bad. My mother had and has a lot of friends that lived and live in New Orleans. It's a drive down the highway from where I grew up. And she was hanging out with some of them in New Orleans one weekend. And they began to ask her if my brother and I were single. So they turned to Miss Mind is black and little blacks, are they seeing anybody? Now, these are friends of hers who have daughters. Some have daughters and sons. It was the ones with daughters that were asking these questions. And she said, yeah, they're by themselves, they're single. And she told them about my brother, who at that time was still either in high school or was just getting into college, so it was okay. But she had to explain why I was. Funny thing is, at the time they asked, I actually was seeing someone. But because I lived in one city and she lived in another, that's another thing, gentlemen. When you find that you easily attract long distance relationships, there's a reason for that too. That's a game. I want y'all to know about that as well. But she told him that she said, well, they say that a lot of these girls now, and she was talking about girls that grow up Huxtable, not hood chicks. She said a lot of these girls now, they only want to date rappers and football players or just thugs. And these women told my mother, yes, that's why we're asking, because they're leaving and they're getting into these big SUVs with football players. And I mean, they're punching above their weight. They weren't saying this about their daughters because they didn't love their daughters. They were saying this because they understood the game. They said, yeah, they're punching above their weight. It used to be that our daughters were the class of girls that these guys could not just use like that. But now they can just date them, and then 2 weeks later, they're not dating anymore. They're not getting commitments from these guys. These guys have options. And if they don't get the rich ones, then they just get a thug. And that's what they were talking about back then. So what this shows you is that there was not just it's not just the thrill of the guys with whom they were going out, but there was more so a contempt for guys that were not like that. And that's why if they don't get a rich guy, then they still just get a thug that doesn't have much. Because the guy that was similar to their fathers and grew up like them, oftentimes we were friends, but there was a bit of a contempt. You could tell because these guys, those of us guys that grew up with them in a similar Huxtable manner, were not only friend zoned, but they would not introduce us. They would not hook us up. That wasn't going to happen. And what's the reason? Because they were in on it. That was the rule. The rule was to shut out most of us. And one of the things that they would do to really irritate the bulk of us was to act like children. Smart in class. Why? Only for the purpose of getting ahead of you. That's it. Why do you think the one with the nice legs and the big behind always wanted to sit at the front of the class? It wasn't just because she was focused and paying attention. She did it so that with her mind, the goal was you be distracted, she remained focused. That was the goal. She would surpass you. That was the whole point. And that's why it is that I look at them nowadays, and I look at even what you younger guys really got to go through, and I see how dumb they are. They're looking at they know what maturity is. Believe me. They know what adulthood is when they get to a certain age. They're simply looking at these things and they're saying there is absolutely no way that we're going to put these things to use for you guys, because that would be too convenient for most of you, and we don't do that. There's literally no other reason for it. Now, that's a hard thing to believe, but that's real. There's no other, they don't gain anything from doing this, because what they're doing is they're running you away, right? So when they're doing this and they're running you away, they're trying to run you off. But by the same token, they also want to demand that you turn around later on and that you provide. And that's when you'll notice that they start to act like they have some sense, but they still can't hide the hurt they have sustained from when they were insisting upon being idiots. They're not just, what they're doing is they're pretending. They're not really that stupid when they're maybe in their teens, maybe, or they just can't not listen to the pressure from their friends. But when they move out the house, they're capable of thinking better. They're capable of it even in their teens, really. In high school, they just can't resist the pressure. But when they get older, when they move out of the house, at that point, you understand what I'm saying, gentlemen, because you've seen them start to make, take your friends in colleges as an example. You saw them start to make better decisions about their future. Certain things they just weren't going to do. They might have been dumb enough to do when they were in high school, trying to get attention. They stop in college, but they still make their minds up that they're going to do certain things that are inconvenient to you, and then they're going to later on act like they didn't know what they were doing when they were 23. I want you guys to know that that's not real. 16, if they have any time to sit down and think critically, then they know what they're doing. 16. Takes about 10 minutes of uninterrupted critical thinking for them to realize this. 23, out of college, either going on to grad school or working or both. They know what they're doing when they sit up there and they start saying things like, well, you know, the married guys are more confident, so that's why sometimes I date them. They know what they're doing. All they're really saying is, because he's married and he's taken, I'd rather him than you who's available. Something's wrong with you if you're available. That's really all they're telling you. Really nothing else. So I mentioned before that war is deception. And I've said that they're at war with us, and you can tell by how deceptive they are about something that's so important to them. They're practicing a deception even to their own inconvenience, just to make sure that you don't have it too convenient. This is part of the reason I set up and I told you that it's war. I didn't say this because I hate them. I'm not a misogynist. I love my daughters as much as anybody else loves theirs, and I love my wife as much as anyone else loves their wife, and I love my mom as much as any son loves his mother. What it is that I understand that you are facing a situation in which, because they understand that the best and the healthiest situation for men and women is chastity, and that is when you are young. The optimal situation is a chaste marriage. While both parties are young, they're looking and saying, yeah, but that would be too convenient for them. Now, they may not realize that that's their way of thinking when they're young. That might be subconscious going up into the 20s. But you can tell that that's what it is, because even if you simply say, why not take this route in which you act like an adult? You behave age appropriately. You can say this to them, and they'll sit up and they'll look and they'll say, but. They don't even know why they're, hold on. All right, thank you. All right, thanks for waiting, gentlemen. Sorry about that. So they understand what it is that when they get, let's say, maybe into maybe the middle 20s, I'm not sure exactly at what age, but I do think that when they're out of college, by the time they graduated undergrad, I do believe that they realize at that point that their behavior only serves the purpose of not being convenient for you and nothing else. I'm beginning to think that they may even go into college thinking this way, or that it may be during college that they come to the awareness of what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. But understand that a disdain and a contempt for you, that plays a large part of it. And what we're seeing is that that contempt and that disdain is moving from one type of guy that it was 30 years ago to be more of us in general. See, 30 years ago, I was the guy they would do this to, and they didn't know why they were doing it. Of course, I was in my teens, but I was that dude. They'll do this, in my case, turn around and behave much better for someone else, but they weren't aware of why, that it didn't seem to be. If they were aware, all of them would lie about it. I mean, some guys who happen to see the behavior would say, dang, what did you do? Thinking I did something to tick them off. And I might have to say, I didn't do anything. We met about a week ago. We've talked twice since then, or something like that. And I later on found out what it was. And a lot of it was subconscious. But by the time I found out what it was, they were conscious of what it was. And that, as I stated before, that had more to do with phenotypical discrimination within the Black population. It had more to do with that, as I stated. And I realized that, and I was told that actually in 2001. That's when summer 2001 was when a colleague of mine broke it down. And I told you all about how in 2017, something had happened and jarred my memory of that and explained it all to me. By that time, I was living here in Saudi. And I remember the conversation, and I remember what jarred my memory, 2017. Funny thing was, the friend of mine that was trying to hook me up when my memory was jarred had less than a year to live at that point. We didn't know it. If he was still around, I would have asked him to go ahead and vouch. But it was about a year after he passed away that I really got active on YouTube. So I don't want you gentlemen to think for one second that they're really just incapable of logic and adulthood and maturity. We may be a bit more capable because maybe we're more trained or we're more designed, or both, to prioritize logic first, then emotions later. I mean, I do think that we're designed that way and trained. I think it's a combination of nature and nurture, if you were to ask me. But it doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing this at all. When they just act like kids, and you're sitting up looking and thinking, how are you this old acting this way? I really believe they just made their minds up they were just going to do it to satisfy themselves. And even if it's not to satisfy themselves, it's merely to be difficult for you that they're doing it. I mean, gentlemen, look at Melanie King. Look at her. I don't know how many lives she's done ever since that guy, It's That Bad, really made her mask melt off of her. You guys might remember that, though, when he asked her why didn't she go to Kevin Samuel's funeral? And she seemed to have a good reason later on, but she was just so triggered she couldn't even state what that was. Did you guys see that one? Giving you guys time to type that answer in the chat. Did y'all see that? I'm sure someone in here did see it, but you look at Miss King, and she even stated to this guy once that, and she said, "We don't bring peace." And she pointed at herself. She was talking, this is in another live stream. She was talking with a Caucasian fella. Now, the gentleman that asked her the question and made her mask melt off he is, I think, Korean and Caucasian. But the one to whom she was talking when she said, "We don't bring peace," was a Caucasian gentleman. Then she pointed at herself and said, "Even I don't bring peace." So T3 didn't catch it, and that's why I'm describing it. She said, "Even I don't bring peace." And when she said "even I," what she meant is, I, a woman that is on your side, a woman that won't let other women come on my show and start spouting the BS. Even I will not bring peace. Now, keep in mind, Melanie, in order for her to start to admit that certain things were wrong with her, for which her husband divorced her, she had to go and get plastic surgery to change her looks. She had to do this. She did come off as very mature in the beginning. And I'm not going to lie, gentlemen. Yes, I am upset whenever when she would get these big cash apps or these big amounts in super chat. Yeah, I was ticked off. It wasn't so much about jealousy, although I have a right to be. It wasn't really about that. It was about the fact that she was doing nothing to earn it. And she had actually told on herself. And that we were sitting up making this too easy. And this leads me into the next thing I wanted to mention. Why am I one of the first ones to sit up and tell you definitively, no, they can act their age. They can be mature. They will slip. They will forget at times, but they can be better than what they are. They're just refusing to do this. Why am I one of the first ones to say this? Because we were trained and taught to be too damn easy. And everything else we've done wrong comes underneath that umbrella. You can look at multiple things we've done wrong. Even when guys cheat, if that's what they want to complain about, that's the guys that they all want being too easy. That's all it is. We were taught not to have standards. And that's why I preach male chastity. Some guys think, well, male chastity is not going to work because the women ain't going to respect you because you have a low body count. That's true. They won't. They won't respect you if you've got a low body count, but they have to respect you if they know that you can get a body count with someone else because you're not going to settle for that BS from her. See, right now, they can't respect one guy that's not going to tolerate the BS from them because they're thinking a bunch of other dudes that, well, I don't have to respect any guy at all. That's what's going through their minds. We're missing it. When more of us start saying, wait a minute, you're childish, and I'm leaving you just because of that. But you're the guy, you're not supposed to leave because I'm childish. They'll say that. You guys might not realize this, but they will say that. If enough of you, let's say the first one of you to say to, especially someone that looks like Miss King as an example, the first one of you to say to a woman with a high assessment of herself, we're done because you act too childish, is going to shock her so much that she's going to respond to you by saying, you're not supposed to leave because I act childish. You're the guy. You're supposed to be the mature one. And that's when you fire back and say, who said anything about any one of us having permission to be immature? What makes that okay for either one of us at our ages? If you're older than her, but she's 26, it's not okay for her to act like she's 21, let alone like she's still in high school. That is not okay, gentlemen. And somewhere down the line, we were taught this, that it was. And yes, this is part of why fathers are very important. Because even a father that might say to you, you get out there and you get all you can get, even if he tells you something that's stupid, which is unchaste, there will come a point where he will say to you, keep your dignity. At some point, a dad will tell you this, especially if he sees you compromising your dignity, trying to get some tail. He'll come back and edit that advice and say, wait, keep your dignity. And truth be told, this is part of why it is that we're going to need not only fathers, but we're going to need fathers that know what these games are. And this is where most of us come in, most of us in this audience. How do we get rid of this? Because let's be honest, a lot of our sons are still going to be in the West. A lot of you are still in the West. And if you have sons, a lot of your sons are going to still be in the West. A lot of your nephews are still going to be in the West for a while. How do we fix this in the meantime? This is where we come in and we start doing what I've been saying to undermine their mother's advice. Because even if they've got dads and their dads aren't advising them, that's because what that means is that that's why mom chose that man. And mom chose that man like that because she could, because she didn't come across a dearth of this, an absence of that type of convenience for her. You see, basic conveniences are rare to you coming from their side, coming from the lady's side. Because as I stated, they function as a union to make sure that you don't find above a very low maximum level of convenience and comfort to yourself. That's why they're upset when you do go abroad to traditional areas. We all know what that, we can see through that in this circle and in this space. They're upset because you're finding something that is convenient to you. It's not paradise, it's not perfect, but you're finding situations that are at least fair to you. And compared to what they want to put us through, very much so. Very convenient to us. Hold on, let me see something right quick. All right, Detroit through and through, what's going on? Now, Solitary Media, I'm not sure if you were answering the question about your age from a long time ago. I'm not sure if that's why you wrote in 51 now, but it may be that you tuned in late, and that's, if you did, that's okay. So what we're getting at, guys, is a situation in which we're going to have to go to our nephews, as I stated in previous recordings and uploads and even lives. We're going to have to start telling them what some of these games are, letting them know that you talk to your nephew when he's, I don't know, maybe 11 and 12, and you say to him that the girls already got the jump on them for 4 years now. Maybe even age 8, they were sitting down playing inside with the dolls while the older women were sitting up talking about dudes in the kitchen. Or that they've been going to hair salons and they've been hearing this stuff again and again and again. They've been hearing games. And see, here's the thing, Blue Gotti, you said that you were going to the hair salons when you were young and you got to hear them talking bad about us. And you stated this. And the thing is, Blue Gotti, what makes it even worse is that at your age, I'm assuming that, well, I mean, you said you're 26, so at your age, you actually got to hear them say worse than what I would have heard. That's the sad part about it. If you were older than 4 years old at that time, then you were going after the time that my mother was telling my brother and I that it was getting worse. Assuming that this trend was national. That's when you got to hear it. If you had not been there, they would have talked about things to do. See, when you were there, they were willing to tear us down in front of you. And then this way you would come up and have this, you would have this view of yourself that, oh, because guys are like this, I don't want to be a man. That's what they wanted when they were talking bad about guys in front of you. But you know what, man? When you were not there, that's when they started talking about the games, what to do, what not to do, what not to be, so that no man ever got spoiled. And by spoiled, that just meant being treated fairly. I'm not joking. Nothing other than that, just being treated fairly. That's all they're talking about. Simply being treated fairly. It's being spoiled to them. Gentlemen, that's why we got to get a hold of our nephews, and we got to tell them, look, we got to say to our nephews, man, look, Nephew, this is what's going on. They are, they're going to great lengths to play games. We got to start saying this to them. They're going through great lengths to play games. We got to start saying to them when they're 11, look, they already got the jump on you by, let's say from about age 8, they already got the jump. We got to start letting them know what they're going to do is they're going to lie. They're going to lie to you. They're going to lie even to each other, but mostly to you. We got to let them know, you know what? Your mom knows some of this stuff and she's not going to tell you. We got to let them know, grandma knows some of this stuff and she's not going to tell you. Auntie knows, because see, your nephews, let's assume that they are your brother's kids. Maybe you don't know your sister-in-law. Okay. Maybe you don't know her that well. You don't know if she's really that good or that bad. What if she's your sister? You're going to have to honestly assess your own sister and whether or not she would tell your nephew the truth that he needs to know. Because their game is to get as much as possible in exchange for as little as possible from the bulk of us. And as we already know, they want most of us to pay for the few that they want to play. They want most of us to feed the offspring of the few that they've wanted to breed. We understand what the game is now with this. At this point, the dual mating strategy has been discussed in this space ad nauseum, but we got to now start explaining to them what's going on. We got to now start saying to them, look, even if she doesn't want me to tell you this, you still need to know this. Maybe you realize that your nephew doesn't know enough because your brother doesn't know enough, and that's why your sister-in-law chose to marry your brother. This means you may even have to go and circumvent your brother, not because you hate him, but because he can't prep your nephew. Because understand this, if you just listen to Mr. Tate for 5 seconds, they consider you a misogynist. If you listened to Mr. Samuels for 5 seconds after he told that lady she was average at best, which she said herself and he merely confirmed or agreed with, then they say you're a misogynist. Now, you've heard them say things like so-and-so hates women. And if you mention just the games that are being played and their refusal to act their own age, and then take accountability for the decisions that they've made in the West, when you say you mention just these things and you're observant and you're aware, they think you hate women, right? They say that you hate women. Why do they go straight past you're learning the games, you want them to be accountable, you don't want to be treated unfairly? Why do they go past all of these reasonable conclusions and go straight to you're a misogynist and you hate women? I'm going to let you guys type in the chat why you think that is. I'll let you guys put that in the chat. What do you think the reason is? I don't know if y'all can hear the track that's playing while I'm waiting on these answers. I got one answer from Fatal Stern, Power. All right. Keep the answers coming, and someone let me know if the track is audible in the background. Okay, so the audio doesn't come through. All right, I'm not blaming y'all. I'm going to see if I can try something different, though. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I don't think y'all can hear this either. I can, but I can tell y'all can. Okay. So we've got lack of thought, power, intellectually lazy. Blue God, it says, conflicted by the truth, and they want to suppress it with unrighteousness. B. Scott says definitely power and leverage. Now, gentlemen, I agree that these are reasons. The core reason, gentlemen, is something else, though. The core reason is because they know mother cuss word well with these games that they've been playing that we should. They feel that we should hate them because of what they set up and talked about doing when we're not around, like in the hair salons and on the phone conversations with each other, or when it's just two of them in the car and they're passing game to each other, or when an 8-year-old is playing with her dolls on the kitchen floor and they all and the hens are in the kitchen cackling about what to do and how to do it and how to manipulate and how to get without giving, how to get these unfair advantages they would never tolerate anybody taking from them. They know from discussing these things. And the ones that haven't said anything and just listened still know that what was discussed would be reason enough for them to hate us if we were doing this. So they go straight to that because number one, not only is that designed to derail what they need to accept, which is accountability and maturity and adulthood for themselves and responsibility for the agency they have, but it's also because they know that if the shoe was on the other foot and they found out about it, they would hate us. They know that low key, a lot of them already do hate us. And even if they don't know why, they do. And this is why they go straight to that. Yes, it does what you guys have said in here. They don't have to think, they can derail it. They're pretending try to make themselves believe this when they do say it, but also because they know that if you flip the roles, if it was us in hair in barbershops, talking about how to live off of them, to talking about how to get rid of all of our responsibilities, but to maintain whatever authority we used to have under the traditional system, how to get them to take care of us while we rule the roost, how to take without giving, how to enjoy authority with no responsibility and no accountability. If we were discussing these things, and they'll say that we are, when in fact we discuss things like how to get them, how to impress them so you can get with her, and how to impress her enough to keep her. That's usually what we tend to discuss, and then maybe how to not be taken advantage of like an idiot. That's about the worst we discuss, but they're going to say that we discuss even worse than that. But if we actually were doing these things and having these discussions similar to them, they, if they found out, would hate us more than they already do. There has to be a level of hatred for them to already sit up and discuss certain things like this. There has to be. I know there is because I can remember when my oldest daughter was, when she was a baby, just able to sit up on her own, crawling, not walking. I remember. And I remember once she squinted her eyes at me and started pointing and gesticulating, and she started talking down to me. She wasn't making any sense. It was baby talk, but she was clearly upset. She wasn't even raising her voice. She was imitating her mother. And her mother doesn't hate me, didn't hate me then, but she was just always upset because of the lifestyle she wanted that was not affordable at that time. This is early 2000s. Nobody could hardly afford anything if they hadn't already gotten off to a good start a decade before. But she picked up on certain things from the mom. So others of some of you my age and in your 30s, you've also dealt with something like that. You've seen that. It is passed on, this sort of contempt for us. And that contempt is the reason that they're refusing to be adults, why they're refusing to act their age and anything else. It has nothing to do with they just can't do it. I mean, granted, we're probably better by force and by nature, a combination of the two. We've had to do that, I understand. But what they want to do is some of them want to give the impression that they're so much better at it than you because they're just better at everything than you are. And then others of them want to give the impression that they don't have to be any good at that at all. They don't have to act their age at all. It's not their job. They got what you want, therefore they should be able to act like kids, and and they should still have access to your Johnson when they want it. Gentlemen, until we not only start eliminating some of them from the runnings based on immaturity, not based on them being wrong sometimes, but based on just immaturity. The same immaturity you're not allowed to have as a guy, you need to start eliminating them for having as women. But until the day when we start doing it, and a lot of us are going to sit up and say, well, we can't do that because of biology, we need to have sexual access. Yeah, okay. Until the day that you do, you've not made any grounds. And the other thing too is this. We're going to have to tell this to our sons and nephews, and maybe even to young black boys to whom we are not related. We're going to have to tell them the exact same thing. If she acts like a child and you know that you would not be able to act like that, drop her. Take your attention away right off the bat. Absolutely do so. And do not pursue her ever again. Do not try to impress her ever again. Because when they're doing that, then they're at the mental age at which they need to be impressed with you walking away for the same reason they would walk away from you. Because understand this, gentlemen, they don't let you act childish. You can actually act mature, and then they say you need to loosen up. Meanwhile, there's someone else that doesn't have to act his age at all. He doesn't have to have anything. He doesn't have to do much, and he's going to get everything. We know that game already. That's the dual mating strategy. But most of you listening in my audience, you are not the idness. You're not the negative stereotype. You're not in and out of captivity. You're not tatted up with gold teeth and some felonies. And so you understand that you are not going to be picked to be able to take all while giving nothing. You're going to be, most of you are going to be in that majority that is expected to give all and take nothing. And one of the ways that you eliminate that right off the bat is that you start to eliminate the immature ones from the runnings. You do not, you don't try to get the number when you see that that's how they are. You don't try to smash and dash when you see that that's how they are. That is not a part of your manhood. Your manhood does not rest upon you smashing and dashing. It is neither a prerequisite condition of your manhood, nor is it a result of you being a man. Smashing and dashing is not going to help. That's one reason why Brittany Renner is as dumb as she is, because if you notice, they stop maturing in the West. They quit maturing at the age at which they have sexual access. That's when they stop, and they don't start to mature again till they lose it, because we're letting them leverage that so that they don't have to act their age. And then we wonder why it is that they seem to really believe it when they start saying that most of us are actually low-key into the underaged, if you will. I can't say it. It's too sickening even for me, because most of us are not. Most human beings have an instinct against that. But we wonder why they seem to really believe when they start accusing us and stuff like that. They will sit up and say, well, you all are going over there because the age limits or the ages of consent are either really low or they're not that enforced, and you think you can get away with it. They're dumb. In these third world nations, you don't want to go to jail there. You absolutely don't. And in the Philippines, you can wind up in prison. Simply because maybe you were involved with the mother who actually was an adult, but you were in the presence of the kids while mom went and ran an errand, and somebody can come along and say anything, and you're not guaranteed to be able to tell a judge your side of the story. Even then, you're going to have to defend yourself, right? So what happens is that they're saying these things and they're trying to convince themselves of that. But when they try to say that this is how we are, one of the reasons they're able to tell themselves that is because they know that they have behaved immaturely and they have still had access. Never mind the fact that they mass trained us that way. And we were stupid enough to fall for it. I'm not letting us off the hook. But never mind that. What's important to understand regarding their mindset is that because of our lack of chastity and our lack of discernment, we've let them act stupid and childish. We've let them be inarticulate. We've let them talk ages beneath their actual age level with vocabularies befitting of someone ages, years younger than them. We've let them do this because that ass though. That's what we've done. When we were younger, we did that. And remember, they're not maturing because they don't have to. So they're taking that impression and going all the way up into adulthood with it. And we're dumb enough to get this idea that maybe they can't do any better simply because they refuse. But then in the workplace, you see them do better, mostly for the purpose of competing with your black behind. I have to say yours because I don't live there anymore. That's what they're taking everything. They take immaturity and they weaponize it. They take maturity and they weaponize it. Whatever it is that they have, they're only going to use against you, never to your benefit. How is that not war? This is not just a conflict. This is the type of hatred that they have, even if they're not aware that they have it. You got to keep this in mind, gentlemen. So all they're going to do is they're going to take their ability to think as an adult and utilize it as a weapon. And then they're going to turn around and they're going to take the childish way of thinking and then utilize it as a weapon, even if to do nothing other than just frustrate you. And remember, gentlemen, they're not going to come around the corner unless you're just one of those few guys that's just super select and they all want, and they're willing to compete for you because you're one of those dudes. Then they're not going to pay the bills. Not for dates or anything else. They're not going to pay the cost to be the boss. So do not let them convince you that they can't behave any better and any more maturely than what they are. If you have to pay for anything, you have every right to turn around and demand that they act their damn age. They can be traditional. They need to be mature when they are traditional. They want to be modern. They need to be mature when they're modern. They take the responsibilities that come with either one. If you're talking and y'all are having fun on the date, you're walking somewhere and she says, I just want to run through that meadow and play. You look at her like she grew another head. Not because she appreciates the view, the meadow's beautiful and gorgeous. That's fine. Yeah, it can look nice, but she wants to run through that and play. I don't care if y'all are 16. Now, I'm not going to tell you to date at 16 unless you're going to marry. But if you and she are 16 and she says that, you can't say something like that. You look at her like she's got two heads and you got to move on to the next. And if there is no next, so what? You make her think there is. Because you know how they do. What? You don't know what I mean? No, I don't know what you mean. Matter of fact, if I do know what you mean, you got problems. You sure you still get these urges at age 16 to just run around and play on playgrounds and stuff? They start twirling their hair and giggling and stuff. You look at them and say, oh my God, are you actually 16 or did you skip some grades and you're like 14? Tell me the truth. You need to call that into question the way that they would do to you. And you need to teach these things to these young boys. When they're 11, they need to hear it so that when they get 16, they know what to do. Because right now, much of what we at my age didn't know to do was because we were placed on the defensive from a young age. Placed on the defensive so much that we tolerated this, thinking that we were supposed to. This is one of the reasons why I ask you gentlemen your ages. Now, T3 said that he's 42, so he and I are fairly close in age. Fair. I'm late 40s. And T3 mentioned how that there was just never this idea that we were supposed to have standards. But then some of the other guys, some of you other gentlemen here, stated something similar. That you would just never, some of you who were younger, you stated that it was the same thing. Let me go ahead and remove this guy. That is not okay. If I could sue this nasty spammer in the comments, I would. So, this has been going on for a while. I mean, I know in my own age group it's like that. But then you take those of you that are 37 and even younger, you were not told to have these standards. And this is part of why it is that we've been in the situation in which we've been for all this time. I want you guys to stop and think before I go, because I gotta say the president, I gotta go and meet somebody for this exercise run. I want you guys to stop and think about this. What happens when this no longer becomes true? What they told me and 3T, I should say what they told T3 and me. What we were both taught coming up, and what many of you in younger age groups were also taught. What happens when someone gets in these young boys' ears and tells them to apply standards to the looks and behaviors the same way they're going to be judged, they must judge. The same way that they're going to be assessed, they must assess. What happens then? How does that change the game? Because let's be honest, a lot of our sons and nephews, even if we left tomorrow, a lot of them would still be here. The majority of us are going to be in the West right now for a while. As many of us are going to leave, and as much as we should, and as valid as these movements and these ideas are, since many of us are not going to be on the same few flights at the same time getting out, and we're not going to change our population in the States drastically overnight or even over a month, not even over years, since many of us will be stuck in the West. How would this change the game for our nephews and even non-nephews left behind, still having to grow up under their parents' roofs? How would this change the game? Consider this. And this is what you have to think about when you're at a gathering next time and you see a young black boy you know, or he's related to you, and you put something in his ear and you know mama ain't gonna like it, but you got to do it anyway. Because the game's got to change for them. And see, this is a contingency plan. We leave as best we can. But in the meantime, while working to leave, we still try to put in these young black boys' minds that which will change the game for them, so that in the event that someone comes up with some way to stop many of us from getting passports and leaving, they're still able to change the game while they're there. So that this way, when they get older, they'll have, Lord willing, they'll have two options. One, a local playing field that will still at least be better than what we grew up in. And then secondly, the option of leaving, hopefully. It's like a plan A and a plan B. You can put them in any order you want. Assalamu alaikum, Charles Irving. So gentlemen, that being said, I got to run, and I want to thank you guys for listening and taking this time out. I went a long time, I didn't mean to, and I want to thank those who donated in the CashApp, because you've helped the process out here. Fighting against the misandry that's going to creep into this part of the world and a third country does cost, and you guys helped out with that. But because of that, we're getting off to an early start, inshallah. And though it's probably not going to make much of a dent in this country in which I'm living, or next door in the UAE, at the very least, the third nation that I picked out to start a business in, you guys will have helped. You will have helped the effort in that third nation, and I appreciate that from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. So that being said, that concludes this announcement. You may now unbuckle your seats and move about the cabin for a little bit, after which go ahead and prepare for arrival. As always, this is your captain and your pilot, Black Heart, Black Mind, Blackout. Assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power just because you don't like it, and black patriarchy till extinction of judgment day. Thank you again for choosing Jet Black Airways, where we turn jet black into a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. And the next thing I'm gonna let you guys know about is, speaking of that, keep looking in my community tab for some good news. Since Woke Canter Forever has been released, and it wasn't as bad where I live. I'll talk about that probably in another live soon, maybe even tomorrow. But I've already gotten 5 pages of a better story written already. So keep a lookout for those chapter by chapter. I do plan to make it available eventually on some outlet, Amazon, Kindle, or such. And but I'll let you guys know bit by bit as it comes out. Thanks a million. Assalamu alaikum. Peace out.